Hey everyone, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zones. My name is Mohit Srivastava. I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce, and I welcome you all to another episode of Modern App Development on Salesforce. Now, today's topic is automate your business process using Salesforce Flows and Apex. I'm joined by Julian. Julian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. First, hello, Mohit. I hope you are good. For all you all, my name is Julian Duque. I'm a lead developer advocate here at Salesforce, working mainly with the Heroku team, and super happy to join Mohit again on this fantastic series about modern app development on the Salesforce platform. And I hope you like the content we have ready for you today.
All right, thank you. Now, before we move ahead, there's a forward looking statement here. Please do not make any purchasing decisions on anything forward looking that we make in this presentation. Um, our introductions are over. So, let's see where we are in our modern app development series here. So, if you have been following us, we did a lot of live sessions over the last month, and we continued with one of them, last couple of days back. And today we're going to talk about automate your business process using Salesforce Flows and Apex. So we're going to try to cover a lot of content. We'll see, because it's a live series, we'll try to cover as much as content we can. Otherwise, we always have slides for you. And in the next sessions, and that is where I'm so excited, is we are going to be talking about using Salesforce platform and microservice driven architecture, using Heroku, and we are going to deep dive into eCars application a bit more, specifically into the application code, the Heroku side of things, into the Node.js service, etc. So really excited about all the content that we have in this series. So let's actually switch gears to Salesforce Flows today. So Julian, right? This might be a very new thing to you. Like, what is Salesforce Flows, right? So Salesforce Flows are, it's one of the tools that allow you to automate your complex business processes. So we have objects in Salesforce where customers can put data as records, and those records we can write automation. And there are multiple ways to do that, but we prefer to only two ways at this point. I mean, obviously we also support workflows and process builders, but flows are like the modern way to build these automations. Now, one thing to note is the Flows product itself is designed for no code builders. That's very important to understand here. That any developer, it need not be a pro code developer, a business developer, or an admin who knows a bit about the processes and who knows a little bit about flows can actually write automation. And as a developers also, it is very important to actually learn how to write flows, because sometimes you might be building systems which later will be maintained by admins. You are no more with your customer, and it's going to be in maintenance, and it is usually maintained by admins, right? So writing using in flows will make life easier for the maintenance. And I'll talk a bit more, when to actually write flows, when to go for Apex, all of these as we move along in this presentation, right? So declarative low code integrations, and also integrations, that's other aspect of it. We have something called as external data services, which you can use to power up your integrations or connect Salesforce to other systems. In fact, we'll take an example of that as well in the upcoming sessions. Um, so really the idea with flows is it's a design with point and click builders. You can connect different systems again, and there's also UI element. Like, for example, it has screen flows, which allows you to quickly build a multiple page application by just dragging and dropping the components. Also, you can flows are something that have pre-built solutions on App Exchange. So let's say a developer has put together a plugin for flows. You can easily sort of install them in your orgs and combine them with the rest of your flows. So that's why it is extensible, and also it has a whole ecosystem of plugins around it. So it's one of those technologies where it's widely adopted, and it's one of those low code tools that you should definitely look to understand and learn how to sort of use as Salesforce developers.
Right. Mo, we have a question. There's a very interesting question on the chat
Yeah.
from Ragabagutta. Uh, does Salesforce Flows supports bulkification?
Yes, that's a very good question. And yes, Salesforce flows support bulkification. And the way you do that bulkification is by declaring a list. Like you don't generally work with one object. Usually, you design your flows such a way that you take lists as input instead of like single object. And I'll show you. I'll walk you through some of those aspects of it. So yeah, they definitely support bulkification both in terms of concurrency. Let's say multiple users are trying to access that, say those flows, right? So for those use cases, also let's say you're passing a bulk of records for the processing, right? So concurrency and also the bulk of records, right? So both of them are supported. Now, Julian, as we are doing this in the series, right, we want to actually explore code, right? Rather than slides. So why don't we do this activity so that we get familiar with the flows, we see the flow UI a bit, and then see what are the powers of flow, right? So our first activity for today is we're going to do something in that eCars application, which is, so if you remember, the eCars has this vehicle objects, right? And the vehicle record has a field called price actually. So there's also one more field called range. So let's look at it. Let's look at it parallelly so that we can, sort of revise it for our developers. So I already spun a Scratch org and have deployed the eCars, application code. Only the Salesforce aspect of it. Let's actually switch back to the Lightning experience. Okay, so let's look at one of the objects that we have. Does it require a zoom on my screen, Julian?
Yes, that would be good if you add
Okay,
a little bit of zoom. I
there you
think
go. Okay,
that's perfect. Thank you.
yeah. So if we go to the vehicles, right, the vehicle data that we have, right? So we have these two fields, right? A range, and then we also have a price. So this is on the vehicle object. And what we want here, Julian, is we have an activity here, a business automation where this field should auto populate. Nobody has to manually go and pick the values here. Depending on the price range, we want that range field to actually flip to short range or medium range or long range, depending on whatever we actually select, the price ranges. So that's an automation ask. Let's take that as an example. That's an ask from the business that they want something like that. They don't want users to be actually going and populating or selecting this, right? One more step less in what they're already doing, right? Let's say they're creating a vehicle, they are filling up all these details, right? So the range field should be auto-populated. So for that, again, you can do this through Apex triggers. You can do this through process builders. There are multiple ways to do it, right? But we are going to do through the flows at this point, right? And then, I have a slide where I talk about a bit about when to go for flows, when to go for Apex, what type of things fit in there essentially. So let's actually go to the flows. So again, it's in the setup UI. So you go to setup, find flows. There's already a flow that has come as a part of the the code base, which is web notification push flow. That's part of the code base. You can look at it, but for now I'm going to create a new flow and go from scratch. So again, flows can be triggered in multiple ways. There are different aspects to it. Like for example, I know that you can have a screen flows. In fact, in one of our sessions, we went through the screen flows. It's low code way to actually build up your screens for your Lightning pages or communities or quick actions. The other thing that I'm going to look at it today is the record triggered flow. That allows you to like run an automation logic when, let's say, a record is created. Let's say a vehicle is created or a vehicle record is modified or deleted. then that automation gets triggered. So that is record triggered flows, and that's what we'll look at it. But I also want to say that there are other options. Like, for example, if you want to run something scheduled, right? Let's say you specify a frequency saying this should run at like 3 a.m. every day, then the schedule trigger flow actually makes more sense, because you can actually schedule them, schedule, like write your logic and then schedule it, right? The other, and this is becoming very powerful way to trigger automation, is platform events. So platform events, again, is a technology within Salesforce where you create these platform events, and actually you can run an automation based on those platform events. Like, let's say when a platform event message is received, you want to run some logic. Now, the whole idea, Holion, behind platform events is to give you something where you can actually loose couple your architecture, right? You're not hard coding or referencing it.
Can you give us an example of what a platform event is, or what could be defined as a platform event,
Yeah,
just to have
sure.
an idea?
Sure. Yeah. So just like you have custom objects, right? Platform events are, events. They are not objects, but you define it basically like an object, right? So you go to the setup and go and say new platform event. You create like an object. You create the fields for it. So you're basically creating a definition or a metadata, right? And then you can use that definition to actually publish that event. Now you can publish through the REST API, you can publish through Apex, you can also publish those events through flows, right? And then once you publish those events, right, you can listen for them again inside Salesforce or outside Salesforce. You can listen for them in Salesforce using, again, platform event triggered flow, good example. Or you can have a trigger like an Apex trigger listening to it. Or if you have an external service, right, these platform events will be published to an endpoint, and you can write some sort of an a client, like a streaming client, essentially something like Comety, right? So you can write using that client and listen for these events. So yeah, really powerful. Actually, it decouples an architecture to a lot of extent, and sort of helps you to write applications using microservices architecture, essentially.
And and regarding to flows, what about the CDC events? If I want to trigger a flow from a CDC change, what type of flow is that?
Yes, that's again a good question, actually. So CDC is change data capture. Actually, that is again another feature which again makes it very easy to say, okay, on an object, any changes happens, I want to track and send an event, right? So CDC is again a specific, like it's an opinionated way of defining a platform event, essentially. So it's built on top of platform event, and there's an endpoint URL that comes with CDC, so you can listen to that. And CDC is essentially for external systems, and if you want to listen in flows, I have to do a bit more research to actually come back and see if we can really use CDCs inside flows. It's more of a programmatic thing than declarative thing. For declarative thing, use
Got it.
platform events. So let's actually quickly go and say record triggered flows. I'm going to choose freeform. So now we choose the object. So first of all, we have ability to say when do we want this trigger to run, right? So say I want to run this when the record is created or updated. And when do you want to run the flow? After the record is saved or before the record is saved? Now, when you are modifying the same object, right? In this case, I'm modifying the vehicle object itself that triggered the automation. So in this case, Julian, it's always recommended to use the before record is saved. And let's say you are doing an operation on another object or related object. Let's say a vehicle record trigger should insert bunch of records on another object, right? Or other records, then you actually go for after trigger. That's a key thing to note. You do not actually go for an after record is saved on the same object, because what happens then is you're trying to update the same object which Salesforce is also updating, and you can easily get into recursions, right? So that's why there is a best practice of so if you need to update a record that launches the flow, right, then use this option. And this option is also very high performant, like as it says, it's highly performant flow. So always use that. Or if you want to insert something else, then use the after record. So let's use the
I,
yeah.
yeah, I have another question. So remote, this is,
Yeah,
this is a
awesome.
new topic for me as well. I'm learning a lot. So I have a bunch of curious questions.
Sure.
So if I can trigger a flow before an object is being saved, let's say I have a validation flow, which is
Hmm.
very complex and call external services. Can I cancel that record save from the flow? Let's say if some external validation didn't happen, can I
Okay.
stop the record for being saved and tell the user, hey, you need to do something else before saving? That's
This
possible,
is
or I'm
That's all
thinking
awesome
crazily?
question. Actually, as a newbie, right, to this topic, I love your questions. Actually, so in Salesforce, right, we have like when we talk about like trigger events, right, there's a whole life cycle actually, in Salesforce. Like, okay, what should happen when, right? So, we should go to our documentation here. Let me point you to the documentation. So let's go to order of execution. We call it as order of execution in Salesforce, and this is very, very important topic when it comes to automation. And thanks for reminding actually. So we have Salesforce actually documents what happens when, okay? And there is no way you can really control the order, there is no way you can control the order. It's pretty much defined that what happens when. Like for example, record trigger flow will happen first, and then your Apex automation comes into picture, right? And then your validation, system validation happens, right? Then there's a duplicate rules that happen. Then the record is committed, and then we have assignment rules, auto response rules. There's a bunch of things that happen, and this is one of like most important piece of documentation actually for all of the developers to work through, learn from this, and also make changes and observe that what happens when, etc. It's a topic in itself. I don't want to actually get into the details of it, but really, to answer your question, Julian, like if we want to control what happens when, that is exactly when we actually go for writing Apex trigger. That's one of the ways. Like in Apex trigger, we have so much of control because all of it is custom code. So you can say, okay, call this method first and then call this method, right? And then do this, right? So you control your layer. So this executes all before triggers that you see, right? Here you can write your logic, custom logic, right? It's all Apex code for this, so you have that flexibility. Similarly, you have the flexibility in here after all triggers, right? um, and then when you talk about validations in Salesforce, there are two different things. There is standard validations that Salesforce enforces. Like for example, if you make a field required, right? If some user is actually typing or saving the record without like providing those values, those are automatically sort of enforced, right, on the UI layer. So as you can see, those are system run validations, right? Like for example, required field, valid field formats. Those happen right before even your the record triggered flows happen. Like even before this flow that I'm building happens, that thing will automatically run, right? And let's say you were writing a custom validation, those you can write in your all before triggers. Now those validations you can also write in your flows, right? Generally not written in the flows. Again, it becomes complex, right? Usually you prefer Apex triggers for that. So let's get
Okay.
back to this. Yeah, I hope it was a lot of
We,
learning for you.
of course, and I hope for all the people in the chat too. We have another good question in the chat for you,
Sure.
Mo. So
Yeah.
let me read it to
Awesome.
you. This is from Kishan. They say, I found in record trigger flow, we can't use is change and prior value function. Likewise, we can use in process builder. So for this reason, we need to use the auto launch flow instead record trigger. Is there any alternative in flow to use such function?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And anytime these type of questions comes up, Julian, I have this documentation that was published on June 25 on by Salesforce Architects team. So this has an architecture guide to building record triggered flows, like what is available when. So I would request that go and read these documentations, right? So for example, each change values, prior values, those are not available today in flows. Those are not available today in flows, and there is a roadmap for those items that is specified here. And this is an official documentation from Salesforce. They can simply search for architect's guide to building record triggered automation, and you can read. Now obviously there was a workaround that was mentioned there. You can follow workarounds, but typically when the cases go complex, Julian, and that's where I recommend that whenever you have a complex use case, right, stay away from flows. Do it through the code, right? Or you can mix and match flows, like you can launch a flow and you can add an apex element to it, like an invocable action that you can trigger, right? So in short, right, whenever there's a complexity, right, your flows can go really complex and it becomes really hard to sort of debug and maintain them, right? And that's why they have put together an architectural guide where they talk about, okay, when should you go for what, right? In short, if you have like really simple scenario, and if your org is like very small, you're a small scale business, right? Generally try to do it using flows, because that way your team which is maintaining it will find it easier to modify and configure and get it going. Now if you have a mature team, right, with lots of developers, it's an enterprise application, you have already established trigger handling patterns, you have a CI/CD system for deployments. If you have those kind of use cases, right, then it's definitely good to actually use Apex triggers and Apex for that.
Thank you, Mo. There is no more questions. I
Okay,
shared the link and there are like some conversation in the chat, but we can continue with
awesome. So
the
let's go
activity.
ahead and say a record is created or updated, right? Let's say a record is created or updated. So before the record is saved, we want to trigger, right? Now we choose the object. So our object in this case, Julian, is vehicle, right? And when do we want this to run? Now when do we want this thing to run? You can really add a condition saying when this is this, then go into the step, right? It's basically like an if else statement in code, right? But for now I'm gonna say every time a record is updated, right, just go ahead with it. Okay, so it's gonna ask me for condition. So I'm going to say none for now. And I'm going to add the conditions here in the decision element. So let's pull a decision element. Now this is just like your if branches, right? But you're declaratively creating them. That's the power of Salesforce. Like, okay, no code, no if else statements here. Just, let's write rules here. So we have this requirement, right? Where we have, okay, so if the price is less than this, right? So let's say for short range, or let's say low or short range, let's call it as short range condition, right? Short range condition. Okay, so let me get rid of these things. And it'll automatically, if you see what happens to the API name, it'll automatically do, API names cannot have space, so it will automatically do. So our outcome, right? So here's the thing, right? So we have this short range conditions, right? So what is that condition, right? So again, it's gonna ask for our decision. So let's let's say this here, and let's call our API names as check for price. That will be more ideal. So let's check for price, right? So we say short range condition, right? Or say short range. Let's get rid of condition. Naming is very important, and it it gets there. Okay, so now here is where we have this lovely dollar record. So that's the record that this operation is running on. So we say if the price range is, let's say, less than, right, let's say less than, let's say 10,000, right, then it's the short range condition, right? So let's write another one for high range, or what's the the name. I think we called it as medium range. Okay, so let's write one for medium range. So we say medium range, and these are like if branches again. And again, you go and say a record dot price and say price is greater than 10K, right? And you add one more condition and say again record dot price, that's that price field, right, is less than I think it was 25K. Let's just say 25K. Okay, so here's the thing, right? So if these conditions are met, then it is a medium range, right? And then we can have one for high range as well. So we say high range, and then again add a condition which says record dot price again equal to or greater than or equal to, I think we can say greater than or equal to 25,000, right? So we got these three conditions, right? So if the conditions are met, right, now with this, right, so you just connect it actually. So you just drag here, you connect the addition elements basically. Now all that you do here is simple assignments, Julian. So you basically say assignments. So now what is the the value that we are assigning, right? So the value that we are assigning here is let's get back the assignments here. Okay, so I want to assign let's say I want to assign low range assignment, or let's call it as populate a range field for low price use case. Or yeah, I'm running out of names, but we can say populate range field for low price. uh, yeah, maybe as low price, but I'm not going to worry about it. So essentially what I'm going to do here, Julian, is I'm going to say a range field, right? So range field will be equal to, now I need a value, right? I usually like to create constants, Julian, so I can, keep up with it. Like I can say
Mhm.
low range. So I'm going to say text value, and its value will be let's call it as low range like this, right? Or short range. I think it was called short range. Let's say short range. It's up to me. So I say done, right? Now I can connect, and when I connect, it was going to ask which condition, right? So for short range, I'm assigning a low, what was that, low range as the range
Mhm.
field value. Now similarly, I can have one more assignment, right, for medium range, right? Let's say medium range, populate range as medium, range field as medium range. Again, I'm bad with the names actually, Julian, but yeah, namings are hard. Naming is hard
I mean,
actually.
you know what they say. That like the one of the three hardest things on computer science
It is,
is
it is.
naming, catch invalidation, and I forgot the
Yes.
third one. What is the third one? If anyone in the
States,
chat knows,
managing states. Is it
managing a
managing?
state, it's super hard. But I know there are like three: naming, catch invalidation, and date time formatting.
Yeah, so I go and say medium range, right, and say done. And again, when I connect my connector this time, I'm gonna say okay for medium range. Yeah, I'm gonna skip the high range just for the purpose of covering other content here. But yeah, you can drag one for that, right? So you basically, and one of the cool features that's still in beta, as you can see, is you can auto layout this, Julian. So you basically say okay, let me save this first. Let's save this. So let's save this as uh, populate range field, or auto populate range field, right? So auto populate range field. Let's make it more clear. Vehicle range field. Yeah. So and then you go to advanced, and this is where you can say, okay, it's a record triggered. You can control the version now. That's so awesome. And yeah, and then basically you save, and then it's just saving, and and then you can auto layout this. There you go. See, I love that feature
Oh
actually.
my God, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So it
That's make me in peace.
yeah, so that's the thing, right? Again, this is before record triggered flows, or and again, after record triggers have more options. Like if you look at the toolbox, right, for after record triggers, you'll find more. But let's activate and test this, Julian. Let's see if this actually
Yeah.
works. Um,
Before testing that, we have another question for you, Mo.
yeah, sure.
This is from Bishwan Bar. Can we have multiple decision elements?
Yes, yeah, you can drag as many as addition elements as you want. You can drag and drop as many assignments as you want, right? And let's switch back from the auto layout thing. So if you go to the elements, right, these are the three elements of any programming thing. You know this, right, Julian? So assignment is, you create variables and assign. Decision is usually if statements. Loops are your for loops, right? So again, yeah, it's just like programming. It's low code programming. That's it. And you basically drag and drop. Now what I wanted to show was, if you go to like managers, you have all those things that we did, like all the elements that we created, like constants, all the decisions, outcomes. These are your variables essentially. If we translate to that, yeah, so the answer is yes, right? I like my auto layout, right? So we've saved it, and let's actually test it. Now only way to test, like if you try to debug here today, right, for record trigger automation flows, um, it's gonna say this, that the flow. So for record triggered flows, there is no way to test it unless you actually test it from the record. So for all other flows, you can use this debug and run, it all works. But for record trigger flows, I wanted to cover the record trigger flows because these are new additions. Especially, I mean, there was an after record triggered flow for sure, but before one is the one that got lately added. So anyways, so Julian, so let's actually say the price value as 15K, right? And see what happens. There you go. It flipped to medium range, right? So if I flip back the price to, let's say, 7,000, right, it will go and say short range. There it is. You see how it is automatically sort of doing the assignment, based on the
That's,
price.
I don't even need to refresh.
Yeah, you don't even need to refresh, right? it's
So
it's instant.
I don't even need to refresh to just get a change. That's very
Yeah.
powerful.
So you can use any combination of these record values, and again, you can do powerful stuff as well. This is just an example to showcase. But yeah, really the idea behind this is to again, low code, as you saw how quickly I was able to create this, right? And there will be complex use cases. Again, as I said, there will be complex use cases. Now, one of the things I wanted to show is, so we talked about that triggered flow, right? I want to show one key difference here. So when you go to record triggered flows, right? Let's say in case I had picked up after the record is saved, you get more things. Like for example, you get actions where you can actually write an apex action and sort of drag and drop, so you can create your own actions, right? So after record trigger flow has more power, right? And then you also get all of these data elements. It's just not get records. Like if I change this, right, if I go and say before record is saved, right, you will see that I only have get records, because before triggers are only meant to modify the same record. That's it. And as I said, the after record is saved is actually for a lot of other data operations you can do. And you can also have actions. Now, I want to go back. So I don't want to save this. I want to go back and point you to one more thing actually. So if you create another type of flow, like for example, auto launch flow, let's say auto launch flow, right? Auto launch flow is, you have what we call it as sub flows. So this is like, Julian, this is like our modules, right? Like let's say your logic gets complex. Like let's say you have a flow which is really a gigantic one, right? What you can do is you can start abstracting some of the logic and create subflows, and then instead of using or building everything as a monolith, you can actually start building everything as modular using subflows. So again, the power of flows is, again, if you really master as a developer, like using subflows, understand what are actions, how you can write apex, right, and combine apex and flows, it becomes a really powerful tool to actually do some modularity as well. You shouldn't do everything in like one flow. Yeah.
Amazing. If I'm not wrong, the flow we have in e-cars, the one that already exists for web push notification,
Yes, let's look
uses
at
the
the.
after. I think it uses an after one. Ah, but that's an automated one.
Yes. So here's the flow, right? So we have the flow. Let's actually. Okay. So this is not
Let's do
active.
some auto layout to that.
Yeah, yeah. I want to do. It will ask me to save once more. Let's save. Let's save this. Let's save this so that it gives us an option of. Okay. You know what, Julian? Why it is not giving you that auto layout feature? It's
It
because
is
let's
it is on
activate.
the
Yes, the version, right? The version matters. I think it is in the it is in the previous version. It's not,
I
probably it's
think
not.
I think I'm seeing the option on the left. Do you see top
Oh yeah,
left?
yeah, yeah. Here. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
My bad. It says one or more element. Okay, so you see that's the thing, right? So then again, there are some limitations
Okay.
at this point. So there is an element that's not connected to the start element. So because of that, it's actually not auto layouting. Okay, we
Okay.
can look at it later, and we keep improving our sample apps, Julian, so we can talk about it offline. So Julian's right. So this one is very interesting. So this one actually, so what you have, right? So first of all, it is in 49th version, right? So we need to upgrade to 50th. And the thing
Mhm.
is, I don't know if you're really using this, but really one of the other features that I want to show was you can actually choose now how to run this flow. Like you want to run in system context, or you want the permissions of the user also to apply. So this is a really good feature, right? Because with this you can say, okay, I want the same level of data security that my admins have configured. So that's also one of the things that you can do. And really, this flow, right, has an apex action to it, and it also uses loop. So all of you watching this, right, should actually go look at this flow a bit, because it uses apex actions, right? So it basically calls an apex class, and we can go over that apex class sometime. And it uses the loops, and it uses the get record. So it fetches the right lead, it loops over that, and for each item it actually sends a notification by making, this is an apex callout, right? So the apex callout is bundled and exposed so that it can be used inside the flows, so
Yeah,
that you
that's
can.
I brought this into the conversation because on that Apex class,
Mhm.
we are calling an external service that is deployed on Heroku. And this is kind of like a teaser of our next session when we are
Yeah,
going to be covering microservices
yeah,
and like a more advanced integration.
yeah.
So maybe before we finish today, I will let you continue. I didn't want to interrupt you. It's
No
just
worries.
I remember this
Yeah,
option.
yeah.
Maybe before finishing, we can show how we are calling Heroku service
PDF
from
service.
an Apex class.
Sure,
So that
we
would
will.
be like a good thing to show later.
We will do that. And so again, flow actions and flow screens are popular for developers. You should actually look at flow actions and flow screens, because flow actions allow you to essentially write a piece of Apex logic and bundle, so that as an admin they can simply drag and drop and use with flows. And again, because it's flow action, it's an action, right? You can write integrations as well in that Apex layer. And also screen components, right? So screen components, again, you can mix and match Lightning Web Components. So other aspect of it is, Julian, and we show this in our sample app gallery. Like if you go to Easy Spaces, you'll find a lot of use cases like this, where we use Lightning Web Components inside the flow. So that's also one of the powers of flows, Julian, is like, as a developer you can build Lightning Web Components and you can use it inside the flow. So that's how they are. And also this technology itself is also available for folks building app exchange applications. So you can IP lock them. Like for example, you don't want to show what is inside or what logic you have written, so there is an ability to do that. You can IP lock it, meaning you don't see the code, you just see the abstracted layer, that's it. So your customers can actually, and you can provide that configuration there, where customers can clone that and customize it further. You can keep releasing and upgrades to your package, right? And the last aspect of it is it's also CI/CD compatible. That means, Julian, what this means is there's a whole metadata behind the scenes, right? So if I'm about to do this sfdx force source pull, right, all of it what we did will be pulled. So you will see that under the flows folder, we will see that there's a new file that will be created. um, this is a little notification that we are getting on all of the sample gallery apps because of the Spring update. But look at this, Julian. So this is what we just created. This is all the metadata that we just created, like the auto-populate vehicle range. And again, it's versionable. You can put it in the Git repository just like all of your other code, and then you can move it to other Salesforce environments. Next time I don't have to recreate that flow, right? I just run sfdx4 source push, and this will push to that org.
Fantastic, fantastic.
All right, so with that, Julian, let's move on to Apex, right? So we talked so much about Apex, right? I know that a lot of you might be very new to Apex, but if you are planning your journey on Salesforce, you should know Apex, right? We use Apex everywhere. It's our native programming language. This is how you write your business rules. It's, if you have a complex rule or a logic, this is the programming language to actually use. And Apex is required for whether you're building a Lightning Web component, or let's say you're writing an Apex trigger, or you're writing a plugin for flows. There are so many use cases. There's plenty more actually. Whether you're writing a web service, right? Everything is Apex. So it is an object-oriented programming language, Julian, and it is very, very similar to Java. Okay, it's very, very similar to Java, and it is strongly typed. Finally, we compile to Java bytecode in the backend, actually. And it also provides something like stored procedure. Like, for example, if you want to query records from the table, we have a language called SOQL, which is very similar to SQL. So you write select statements on the tables, and you can query the related tables, and you can insert the data using DML statements. Very, very similar to stored procedures. So again, as I said, a lot of the use cases we use Apex. Anytime you have custom transactional logic, that is a logic that occurs over the entire transaction, right? And like the use case that you were mentioning, that hey, what if I want to control my transactions, right? What if I want to say I want to execute logic A, then only execute logic B, then logic C, right? So that type of use cases, that's where Apex actually comes into picture, because it gives you a programming language to actually code, and you have more flexibility there, and you can write custom logic on operations. Like the example that we just did, we can also do it through Apex. So no secret in that. And complex validations, web services, email services, like if you want to send email from Apex, right, you can. And then Apex can be invoked from Lightning Web components, Aura components, Visual Force. This is our prior technology, Julian. So those were all using Apex. So if you are working for an enterprise client, right, don't be surprised if you have hundreds of Apex classes in the org for you to actually explore and maintain. Yeah.
We have a couple of questions in the chat. I
Yes.
think I answered one, but I'm going to ask again.
Yeah.
This one is from Smirty.
Yeah.
Smirty. Sorry if
Smriti.
I'm mispronouncing your nickname or your name. The question is, as with Process Builder, do the Apex classes need to have an invocable annotation to be
Yes.
called from Flow?
Yes, I missed that thing. So there is this statement, right, I wrote in the slide, which says simply add the add invocable method interface to make it available for your flows. We have
Excellent.
we have some short videos as well. I think one of our evangelist advocates is working on some videos around how to like quick starts, like those quick start videos where he'll show you how to create an invocable action, how to make a Lightning Web component available for flows, and exciting things like that.
The second question is from Igor.
Yeah.
It is, what is the difference between pull and retrieve in this context? Are you using any Git plugin?
Oh, that's a good question. Again, you should go back and look at our developer tools session where we sort of covered this, right? So we are not again. So we are not using any special plugins or anything for force source pull command. Scratch arcs have this capability of giving you a source tracking feature. That means any configuration that you do in the arg, you can retrieve all the metadata that you did by just running a simple command for source pull. Similarly, if there is anything locally you modified in your project workspace, you can easily move to your those changes to your Salesforce arc by running the for source push. So we are using SFDX CLI, Salesforce CLI, essentially to do these commands, and that's what it provides these commands. And somebody talked about source retrieve commands, right? Again, a lot of the orgs have this capability now, like developer sandboxes and Scratch orgs have the source tracking feature. Then you don't have to worry about tracking the metadata, right? But there are, if you're working non-source tracked orgs like production, or let's say a developer org or a Trailhead Playground, for that there is no source tracking sort of enabled, right? So for those org, you can use this SFDX for source commands like for source retrieve, where you can individually specify the metadata saying, hey, I want to retrieve this flow with the name X, and then you retrieve only that file, right? So that's for non-source tracked orgs, if that clarifies the stuff. But Julian, we'll go ahead and actually, so I have some time left actually, so I can pretty much walk through this. Let's see. So I wanted this activity to show how to write Apex triggers, etc. Right now, before that, I want to do one more thing. That is, go to Apex recipes application. So Apex recipes application should be your one stop for finding all the Apex recipes. And if you're learning Apex right now, right, you literally find all of the things that you need, in a production quality. Um, so let's actually open up one of the orgs where I have the Apex recipes application, Julian, where I can actually show the developers what this Apex recipe is all about, how they can use it, how they can clone it, and what are some of the the code that is built by Kevin, and this whole credit goes to Kevin actually for building out this amazing recipe sample recipes application. So you go to Apex recipes essentially. So Apex recipes is where we have bite-sized code for everything that you need in Apex. Like for example, let's say I need a trigger, right? So you go to this Apex recipes tab and you go to like, okay, how do I write an trigger on an account like with a pattern, right? So with an enterprise pattern. So currently is following a trigger handler pattern. And Julian, you might be very new to this, what is trigger handlers, etc., right? It might be very new to this. So what happens is, Julian, so we have Apex triggers and you can write multiple triggers on an object. Now what happens is developers, if they write multiple triggers on an object, you lose this feature of controlling the transaction. So we always recommend as a best practice that you write only one trigger and you have a pattern in place. You have an enterprise pattern in place where what you can do is you can simply extend that. Like for example here, right? Let's go over like trigger handler pattern that Kevin has. So in this trigger handler pattern, Kevin has created a virtual class. Okay, he's created a virtual class where he is actually given all the context. Like for example, for example, if you want to run a logic only for one time, or let's say you want to run a logic maximum for 2 number of times, right? So you can do all those features. And also what he's done is he's created an interface, sort of an interface, an abstract, I think it's a virtual class, right? So it's a virtual interface that is created so that, let's say you're writing a trigger on an account, right? So you just extend that class and then you just override the pieces. Like for example, I need a logic on before insert. I can go and override the before insert logic, right? So the developer should actually go and look at these recipes, and we have recipes for a lot of things, like for integrations. Like let's say you're making an API call out, and that's where I want to get to the next one. Julian, right? So let's say you're writing, making an external service call out. So there is a recipe for that, and there is a utility class for that, and all the dependent classes are here. Like for example, API service uses REST client, so you can go to the REST client and look at the interface that is built, really beautiful code here. And he also has documentation. Like for example, you can go and browse to the documentation around, okay, what are the public methods and how to use them with an example, right? So this should be, definitely look at this. If you're new to Apex, definitely look at this recipe. There's a lot of work that has gone behind this for sure. And it has recipes for everything. It also has best practices around how to sort of write code so that it is secure, like the security best practices around enforcing field level security, enforcing what we call it as CRUD, which is create, read, update, and delete access. So Julian, this might be also new to you, and all the developers here who are very new to Apex, right? So generally when you write Apex, right, we also want to make sure that the permissions that are configured for an object is still true. Or like for example, let's say you have set an object to say a user should not have read access to that object, right? Now in the Apex code, you have to handle it. Actually, if you do not handle it, right, the Apex code will still access that data, which it shouldn't as a user, right? So that's why we have these annotations like inherited sharing. So once you make inherited sharing, right, it will have the default rules configured. And then we have some methods here to actually check, like can the user is an excellent example of how to incorporate your security best practices. So there is a CRUD methods here. So go look at it. Actually, it's a topic in itself. But really, a lot of the code is actually done for you already, and there's a lot of best practices. So you should actually explore it.
Well, there is another question in the chat from Richard. Do we
Yeah.
have any SQL recipes?
Good question. So if we go here, let's look at, do we have data recipes? So we have data recipes. So in the data recipes, we have SQL recipes and also SOSL recipes. So you can actually go and look at that. In fact, we also have DML recipes, dynamic SQL recipes, metadata catalog recipes, and it kept going. Last night I was reviewing some of the Kevin's code around a framework that he's writing for logging, right? So that will be incorporated as well. So this code base is growing, but definitely take a look at it because it has all that you can imagine. At least like last 5-6 years, whatever coding I've done, I've found that most of the stuff is here for a lot of the utilities. Again, it might not be your exact business use case, but it drives you in that direction of, okay, here's the recipe, right? Here's how your code should look in general as best practice. So okay, so this example, right, I'm going to leave that to our developers here to try, right? So use the trigger framework that Kevin has put together, use that and do this exercise, which is basically when a vehicle is sold, right, we want an automated task to be logged to remind sales reps to talk to their head of sales. So this is a simple scenario that I consider. So write Apex trigger and try to follow the same code that Kevin has, like the handler pattern. So for solution key, I'll definitely post it in the chatter group that we have, the Trailblazer chatter community group we have for the sessions, and we will share the URL shortly for that. But yeah, definitely feel free to go there and try out and let us know if you are like sort of running into any issues, or I'm going to post my solution so you can compare with that. So last but not least, I want to spend a minute here, which tool to choose, right? We already talked, right? So this, again, I took it from that architecture guide that's public, right? So again, if you have Apex Dev available, right, and have well-established continuous integrations, right, and trigger frameworks in place, then adding flows to the mix can be significant overhead. That's a true statement here. Like Julian, if you have like well-established patterns, right, mixing both flows and Apex triggers, you have to be really careful. Like inside flows, you can have plugins for Apex. That's good. But having, let's say, on a same object, having flows, triggers, workflow, process builder, you're definitely running into a mess here, and you need an architectural pattern. So just remember that. And then if your code is maintained by admins in future, right, and your client is not going to have access to developers, then definitely Flow is a good choice, because you saw how I was able to like auto layout, how I was able to visualize my code, right? So somebody coming from non-coding background with low code capability, they will be easily be able to maintain that, right? Now if you have combination of devs and admins, right, you should use flow triggers, right? But let's say you have complex list processing logic, those can be sort of deviated to Apex. So you basically mix and match, right? And yeah, so that's one slide actually, Julian, telling the best practices here from our experience. And Julian, we wanted to talk about the next session, which is on, I think, 10th of December, which is upcoming, where we are going to be talking on microservices on Heroku, right? So we wanted to, I can quickly show our developers the code base where we actually call that web service that we'll be sort of talking about in the next episode, right? So we have a class called PDF create service, right? So this is an Apex class essentially, and this has an aura handled method here, right? So we call this class from a Lightning component. So this example shows you how to make a HTTP request from Apex to an external third-party system. Now we use something called as named credential here, which I'll definitely talk in detail in the next episode. But you see how we are calling that Heroku application that Julian is going to talk about, like how did he build that Node.js service. But this is an example that shows how to sort of make an external call in a very simplified manner, right? Now, one of the questions was, okay, can I expose this in flows? Definitely. All that you have to do is give an invocable interface to this. So if you give an invocable interface, right, this becomes essentially this becomes available in the flows. Only thing you have to take care is make sure that this is not one single object like this, Julian. Best practice when you actually use um, in flows, always make sure this is list. It's not a single element like that. That
Yeah,
is what
you
bulkification means.
can open the web push notification one.
Is it
Yeah,
this one,
web
the
push
web push
service.
service? Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Now, if
Okay.
you see there is one down,
Yeah.
the next method,
Oh, there you
that
go.
one, the
Awesome.
flowing bug with push, it receive a list of IDs,
Good.
and then it enqueues a job. And now we have another class, which is the queue push. If you
This
can open
class.
that,
Yes, sir.
that goes through all of the leads and invoke the web push service method.
Got it. Okay.
So
Awesome.
that's how are we handling that situation there.
Yeah. Also, I see it as Aura enabled, which means it's also using in
In a
the
Lightning Web component.
yes. Okay. So Julian, real quick, we are running out of the time here, right? So I have the helpful references again. We take some time to formulate that, so I'll be sharing it, and you can use this to explore or go deeper into these topics that we covered today, right? And then our sample gallery apps, again, I keep specifying sample gallery apps in all of my sessions, because a lot of our reference code is there. We pretty much all the code that we have is we have it there, so you can really get a lot of idea and a lot of code examples there. And then the chatter group. Now this is very important, right? So this is where we are sharing the slides, sharing all the content, and this is where I'm going to put the solution key for that problem statement that we couldn't cover today, right? So do follow this chatter group. We have all the slides there from the previous sessions as well, and we also are posting our recordings on both Trailhead Live. So if you go to trailhead.com/live, you will find that all of our recordings will be there. And also, we posted to our Salesforce Developers YouTube channel. So please do follow Salesforce Developers YouTube channel, and also tune into the recordings in case you want to tune it later, right? Finally, thank you so much for taking time today, and I hope you have a nice day or evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much and have a good one.